2017. Tonight's webinar is for siblings or about siblings. And so I'll take any question from a sibling that they have about their brother or sister who's at a vote or who has been at a vote. I can also have questions from parents that siblings may have asked you, or if you're challenged with supporting a sibling, I'm happy to do that. What I would ask is that you list your age on the question or the age of the sibling, so that I have some idea about how to talk back to what level to talk back. Having said that, we have a couple of handfuls of pre-submitted or commonly asked questions, so I'll get to those first, and then I'll take any of your live questions. The first question, pre-submitted question: with our son away at treatment, his brother at home is not interested in talking about him or getting any updates on how he's doing. Any advice on how to help him or get him to open up? And the brother's 13. The first thing that I say, this is a common experience that parents have. Remember that a child in the home with somebody who needed to come to a vote oftentimes experiences some kind of trauma, some kind of difficulty. It's uncomfortable, it's painful. And a key important piece of that is that they didn't have the choice. Right? They weren't choosing into that, it was happening to them. So the first idea here is that we want to make sure that we give the 13-year-old brother, in this case, that we give him some choice in that. In some way, we give that power back to him that he had lost when dealing with his sibling. And I think that's really important. There's this quote, this idea that I shared last week on my social media, on my Twitter account, that said basically that when you take away somebody's defenses, right, the walls in front of them that they put up to protect themselves, that you're not really preparing them for what it's going to be like without those walls. And so we need to gently support people. If he wants to put up these walls, I would honor it. I would begin by honoring it. I would even acknowledge it and say that that's a normal thing, and say, if he's willing to talk about it, why he feels that way. But he's also got to know that when he explains himself, that you're not going to try to talk him out of it, right? Because that's what we would try to do. We would try to tell him the benefit of opening up to his brother and communicating with his brother and hearing about his brother. So I would want you to avoid that and just listen and respect the wall that he's putting up to protect himself, and understand where it comes from. And I think oftentimes when you do that, when you lay a really good foundation of supporting and honoring the defense, oftentimes then they feel safe to open up. But if you tear it away from them or try to rip it away, I think you re-injure them in a very similar way than they felt injured by or hurt by their sibling when they were at home. So it's a general principle, and I think it applies in this instance. Next question: how can I be there for my brother when he is done at a vote if he is going straight to aftercare? This answer is going to really apply to several of the questions I assume tonight. One is learn about what he's doing. Even attending a webinar like this and sharing that with him. While he can't be in your presence, the more you're aware of what he's doing and what he's working on, and anything that you're willing to do. If you're willing to read a book that he was assigned, because most of the books that we assign our clients and students to read, most of them are interesting stories. Right? They're not all about depression or substances. They're about stories. So read one of the books that he's reading to support him. Writing a letter. Ask your parents to ask his therapist if it would be appropriate to write a letter. So yeah, you can't be there for your brother in the same way that you might be able to be there for him if he's at home. That's for sure. We can't change that. But you can go along on the journey a little bit with him. Learn about some of the things that he's learning about. Learn about some of the principles, the tools, and the stories that he's learning about. And then if you can have a conversation through letter writing with him, then he's going to feel supported in this process. And also, when he comes home, he's going to feel that. If you went along the journey, I think I'm going to say this to siblings and for siblings. This is really for the siblings themselves. Remember that if you're willing to learn some of the stuff that your brother or sister is learning at a vote, then that's a way of saying you're not the only one who needs to learn something. You're not the only one who has the problem. You're not the only one who could benefit from this stuff. I think that's really, really helpful. But most of us are uncomfortable with that. Most of us don't want to look at ourselves, and we say things like, well, he or she was the one with the problem. They were the ones getting in trouble or acting up. And while that might be true, it's uncomfortable for all of us to look into ourselves, to talk about our feelings. Comfortable work? I can't think of anything more respectful and honoring of your brother and supporting of your brother. I'll tell this story, and again, it might apply to several of the questions tonight. I had a client some time ago, a young adult client who was going out to visit her brother at his aftercare program. He was living in a sober living home in California. And she asked her parents if she could talk to me. She was 20-something years old. And she said, can I talk to Brad and get some coaching because I don't want to make a mistake. So she called me and we talked for a while, and she said this. She said, I'm afraid I'm going to make a mistake, that I'll say something to my brother that'll set him back. And I said, why don't you tell him that you're anxious? You'll tell him that you're afraid of saying the wrong thing or making a mistake. That'll be so wonderful for him to know that he's not the only one who's working, the only one who's the project in this case. I don't know if she decided to do that, but it was very, very clear to me that this young man felt like he was the only one in the family with a problem. And that's not a very happy place to be when you're the only one with a problem. So it's nice for everybody else to show up and say, I can learn and I have some problems too, or at least something I can improve on. Next question. I see my parents doing a lot of work and investing a lot of time and money in my brother's stay there. What happens if he comes home and nothing changes? I have two thoughts about this. One of the things that I say to parents, and I say this on the sibling webinars, is I say to parents, prepare yourself for nothing changing, right? Obviously, at Evoke, very often a lot changes, right? It's one of the most, wilderness therapy is one of the most powerful interventions, therapeutic approaches I've ever seen. That's why I got into it. But some things are going to stay the same. And so I think if you hold out hope, or pin everything, put all of your eggs in one basket and say, I hope everything is the same, or to me has changed, nothing is the same, I think you're setting yourself up and your brother or sister for a failure. You'll end up being resentful. One of the most harmful things that parents will say to their children is, we're back at square one, or we're back like it was before. And that's not true. Yes, some of the behaviors might show up, but you're not back at square one. You know something and they know something, and something has changed. So try to avoid thinking about it in those black and white terms. But what I tell all family members, in fact, I tell the clients and the students in our programs this too, is don't plan on anybody at home changing. They have the same kind of fear that you have, actually. And so when everybody is focused on their own change, everybody else sort of lets go of relying on everybody else changing, you're setting yourself up for success. It would be easier and nicer, and of course we would have some joy in a lot of ways if everybody changed, but the only thing you can do is focus on yourself. The only thing you can focus on is how you can adjust. And that's why I think for siblings, that's why we do these webinars. That's why I would love it if siblings would learn about and read about some of the things that their brothers and sisters are learning about, so that you're prepared for it. And again, it's uncomfortable to do that, but it is what we teach in psychology all the time. The only thing you can control is yourself. And I'll tell you this, this program, while we call the client in our program, we call them the identified patient. While we work with the identified patient, the one with the most symptoms, this really is a family intervention. And so the families, the parents specifically, who I think love our program the most in the end, aren't always the parents with the highest outcomes in terms of their children changing. The parents that love our program afterwards and for years to come are the parents who allowed our program and what we teach to make the biggest difference in their life. So part of what I teach parents is I teach them how to see things differently and how to hear things differently. And when you have new eyes and new ears, then even a problem changes its quality, right? It feels differently when somebody else is struggling. So again, it goes back to that idea of the only thing that you can really change is yourself. And so focus on that as much as you can. And of course, we all hope that everybody in the family experiences wonderful change. And many times that is the case. But kind of concentrating on other people changing is setting everybody up for failure. How long will my sister be gone? Well, that depends, and thank you for asking the question. We wish that we could bring your brother and sister home, or your parents could bring your brother and sister home as soon as possible. We know that you miss them, and it's okay for you to feel that feeling. It's not fun to feel it, but it's okay to feel that. It's okay to share that with your parents. It's okay to share that with your brother or sister too. And having said that, we want to make sure that we get as much of a start on helping your brother or your sister be better, heal, feel better about themselves. And our experience tells us, I've been doing this a long time, I've been doing this for about 22 years, and what we've learned, what I've learned in those 22 years is it takes longer than we would like. But I don't know if you've ever taken medication, if you've ever gotten sick or gotten an ear infection, your parents have given you antibiotics. If you have, you'll remember that you have to take the antibiotics all the way until they're gone. Even if you start to feel better, your parents will still have you take the antibiotics. And it's very, very similar to that. Even when your brother or sister starts to do better, there's still some work, some healing, and some improvement that we can build upon in the process. So I know when I sent my son to wellness, he was 14, and he had a 5-year-old sister at the time. And I remember how much she would miss him all the time and how hard that was for me to know that she missed him all the time. We want him back, but we want him back for 2018 and 19 and 20. We want him back in your life and around in a healthy way for years to come. Thank you for asking that. I'm not sure that I trust my brother is going to make the lasting changes he needs to. I've seen him with placements before, and I'm not sure I know how to trust he is doing as well as he says he is. Thank you for that. I think that's a very similar concern that the sister had a couple of questions ago. In other words, I don't know how far along and how deep the changes are. I always tell parents to kind of take a we'll see attitude. Just watch the change. And it makes sense that you don't trust your brother. You have experience with him making some change and then going backwards. And so you have some pain there, some hurt there, some betrayal maybe even there, some broken trust for sure. And so I think it's okay to be skeptical. I think it's okay to kind of take a wait and see attitude. I don't think it'd be helpful to punish him with that, to throw it in his face, but I think it's absolutely okay to be skeptical. I tell parents that all the time, that it's okay to kind of take a we'll wait and see attitude and move very slowly, decide things very slowly. But again, be careful of holding your brother up to a standard that nobody could live up to, a very black and white, all or nothing kind of standard, because nobody's going to be able to measure up to that. So in order to do that, again, you're here, you're watching it, you've submitted a question, so you're doing some kind of work yourself. My brother, 14 years old, is currently out of vogue, and his therapist said I could come visit when my parents do. I was wondering what kinds of things I will do with my brother when I'm there. Is there a sample schedule? That's a good question. Not all siblings get invited out to the field. It's very rare, in fact, that siblings get invited out to the field. So congratulations on that. Your therapist or your brother's therapist must believe that there's a very positive connection. It'll be a very positive thing with your brother. I think the biggest challenge for people going into the field is that your brother's going to be really far ahead of even your parents in terms of some of the tools and skills that he has. Both the cooking and fire making skills, for example, building a shelter, for example, but also being able to communicate. So in a lot of ways, again, like I said to the older siblings who just wrote me, be a student. Talk about how you're feeling. Try to have the courage to talk about how you're feeling. And if it's scary or anxious for you, try your best to share that with them. But when you get out to the field, there'll be time with the group, cooking meals, playing games. Sometimes you'll sit in on a group, his peers. And then there's time when you're just by yourself with your family, where your brother's teaching. He's going to take care of you. He's going to cook for you. He's going to make a fire for you. He's going to teach you how to build a shelter and make sure that you're warm. And out of the weather. So it depends on what the group is doing that day, but it's cooking, games, therapy in the group, therapy in a family. You might go on a day hike, and then you're going to learn about all the things that he's learning about, both from how to make a shelter and tie a knot to how to make a fire by rubbing sticks together. So you just kind of go around that, and then at some point the therapist will come into the session. You'll have a family therapy session, and I congratulate you for your opportunity, but also for your willingness to step into something so uncomfortable and so unknown. What is the best way to communicate the hurt that my brother's actions have caused me and everyone else in the family? If you want to learn our communication model, watch the webinar on communication. That's one thing. You can also, if your parents have a copy of my book, or you can get it on Kindle, you can look at the chapter on communication, because your brother has been instructed in that model. It's a simple feeling statement and listening statement, that listening skill that we teach all of our clients. It's not very, most programs teach some version of the I feel statement. That's how I would encourage you to do it. Is even just look at the chapter, the section that kind of tells you how to do it. I would encourage you to do it in the form of an I feel statement. If you want to learn more, watch the webinar or listen to the podcast on healthy communication. If you want to even go deeper into it, you would read the book Nonviolent Communication, which talks about sharing our feelings from a place of, this is what I need, instead of a you message. You know, you messages are, you're a jerk, this is what you did wrong, this is how you are bad. I messages are, I feel hurt, or this is what I need to feel okay and safe. So I would encourage you to do it honestly, assertively, and if you're willing to, look at some of the tools that your brother has learned, use those tools to do it. And if he's doing his work out here, he will absolutely listen to and respect that. And he'll respect it, I think, even more usually when you use the skills that he's become familiar with and become instructed and had to practice out here. What kind of changes should I expect in my sister? I think you can expect your sister to be more patient. I think you can expect her to have this new way of talking, to be able to listen better. I think you can't, I think it's not, like I said earlier, you can't expect it to be perfect. You'll see some of the old stuff sometimes, but you'll see her be able to pick herself up after she falls, apologize after she makes a mistake. You'll see her more aware of herself, hopefully more honest in when they're feeling. I was just having a discussion, an argument really with my wife yesterday, and when we were talking, my wife said to me, the most honest and vulnerable that I can be, and then she shared her hurt with me. And the mistake that she made in this example came from a place of fear and anxiety. And it gave me the courage to show up in the same way. So see, the more we take off our armor, you know, that thing that we do to protect ourselves, the more we're willing to be vulnerable and to tell the truth, to share our feelings, the safer it is for each other. The more welcome we feel, the more safe we feel to open up. So hopefully you can do some of that, and hopefully she's learned some of that. So I think you'll see some various skills. And among those, I think you'll see the ability to listen. And then you'll see her make some of the same old mistakes and hopefully pick herself back up. And hopefully as a family, you'll be able to be patient with each other. And know that everybody, including you, including your parents, aren't going to get it perfectly right. See, the students and clients that graduate from our program, that come out of our program, sometimes they're just as impatient with parents because they've been in our program for 10, 12 hours a day, 14, 15 hours a day doing therapy. And in our program, they do very well, but they have a lot of support. They have a lot of staff helping them and peers helping them. But then they go home, and parents and siblings haven't learned as much. So sometimes they can be really impatient too. So we ask them to be the patient one, and the one to recognize that they've learned more, they've been kind of immersed in, right, in it more than anybody in their family. So in some ways, more is expected of them. To be patient and forgiving of each other, for sure, is one part of the recipe for success. How much of therapy education is based around family living? Our brother enrolled in the program has voluntarily withdrawn from all family life. I would love to see efforts made to help him understand how we miss him being a part of the family life, re-emphasizing to him the value of the family. Absolutely. I mean, that's why you're on this webinar. That's why I'm on this webinar. Your parents are asked to watch anywhere from 15 to 30 hours of these webinars, speaking on different subjects. We have the podcast, we have the book, we have parent mentors, we have parent visits, parent letters, parent phone calls. We have all of this to support the entire family because, again, like the brother is the most symptomatic, but it's supporting the entire family. So getting the family involved. But that wasn't really a question. I think going back to your question, I think when the family relationships start to heal, I think one of the questions I would ask your brother is why. What was it that you weren't getting? What need were you not getting met inside of the family that you were trying to get met elsewhere? Now, he might not have been doing it in a healthy way, I assume, right? He might have been hanging around peers that were doing negative things. That's true. So he needed to come to a vote. And at the same time, there's still an important question about what do you want from your family, and the family learning to listen. And believe me, there's a chapter in my book on the myth of being right. We've got to let go of in our families. We've got to let go of who's right and who's wrong, and we've got to learn how to talk about feelings and vulnerabilities. So I was talking to a family just recently, and they were asking about how to respond to a child who was making some decisions that they were having a hard time coming to terms with after Evoke. And what I said to them, do the best to be connected, practice the skills, listen, own your own feelings. Don't make your child be responsible for your feelings. Your anxiety, your anger is yours. You have to manage that. Because if your son or daughter gets into trouble, you want to be the first phone call that they make, right? That's the best. Because they trust you. You don't want them to not call you because they think they're going to get an I told you so. I wrote a blog just this week on, this is called Attachment Day. I wrote a blog on attachment this week. So what I would say to you is absolutely we do that. And just naturally through the processes, families heal and children want to be around their parents. And what I'm also saying is part of that is about your brother healing, and part of that is a family learning to meet him where he's at in a way that they can support him. Learning to listen, learning to be non-judgmental, learning to be more compassionate to each other. So that's a part of it too. I think I have one more pre-submitted questions, and then I'll take the live questions. What is a typical day like for my brother? A typical day is wake up. They have to get breakfast ready, maybe make a fire by rubbing sticks together. They cook breakfast in the morning. Then they have to clean up camp. After they clean up camp, they might have a daily group, a meditation, do some yoga. Then they'll go on a hike. They might stop and do some reading or some schoolwork. They can have group anytime during the day. Anybody in the group can call or ask for a group. So sometimes on an average day, there's 5 to 10 small groups that last 5-10 minutes. So they're always talking about their feelings and their relationships and problem solving and conflict. They stop for lunch at some point during the day. They hike in the afternoon. They might work on making Bodrio fires or some of the projects they have from their therapist. They get to their camp at night. They have rotating chores every day. Every day there's a new chore. They have to set up camp. That includes cooking dinner, making a fire again, collecting wood. Then they have dinner. And then after dinner, they have another formal group. After group at night, they might have songs or storytelling or play a game. We try to do fun time every day. So that's what a typical day looks like. But it adjusts according to how the group is doing and what the goals are. But that's what a typical day might look like. 24-year-old, how can I help my brother when he comes back from therapy? I think I already answered that. I hope I answered that. If I didn't, you can ask it again. I'm nervous for my sister to come home. I worry that even though she has boundaries, she will see her bad friends. That she will have them come and pick her up and take her away. Sister who's 18. It's possible. I think your nervousness, I would respect your nervousness. In other words, it's kind of like what I was saying to some of the other questions. Some of that could happen. you and your family that are at home, you want to be the first phone call that they make. So doing some of your work might be helpful. But some of that could happen. But I'll tell you something though, to all of you, to the siblings. This program, you can't go through this program and have it not change you. I've had the research actually shows us. We've done research, follow-up research for years now, almost a decade. And the research shows us that there is a dip after a child comes home. And part of that, again, speaks to the idea that your parents and you need to make sure that you're learning how to respond in different ways than you responded before. So that's number one. But there is a dip. But it's almost like some of the skills and tools go dormant for a little while, like a tree losing its leaves, or flowers going dormant over the winter, and then when the springtime comes up. So that stuff is in there. They have more awareness. They have access to those skills. I can remember visiting one of my former students who had regressed over a several-year period, and within a few minutes of seeing him, the family brought me to his house 5 years after he was with me. And he started talking to them a way that we had taught him not to do. And when I simply reminded him of talking differently, talking the way that we had taught him, he went back to it. When I got out of treatment when I was 16, I completely regressed and relapsed. Lasted about 6 months. But when I was ready to change, I had all those tools immediately, all of that insight immediately right there. I didn't have to build it from the ground. It was always there in the back of my mind. So having confidence and faith in the process. I wouldn't try to take away your anxiety. I think it's well-deserved anxiety. I imagine it's well-deserved anxiety. But there's something in there. And then what I would say is, if this was a parent asking a question, I would say, really practice and learn and prepare yourself for how to respond. What I love when parents say to me, I don't get this from siblings necessarily because it's not the same thing, but it will explain something. When parents say to me, this is my favorite thing that I get from a parent, letter, phone call, email, when they say, our son, our daughter, went back into their old ways. But that's not what I'm calling you or writing you. I'm calling or writing you because I did something different. Instead of lecturing, I held a boundary. Instead of yelling, I stood up for myself assertively. Instead of arguing or debating, I listened better. Instead of throwing a tantrum and letting it escalate and get out of control, I stepped away and took a time out. Whatever it is that they did, that's what I love the most. Because even though the child that came to Evoke, I've said this already on the webinar a few times, even though the child that came to Evoke has the most symptoms, was acting out the most, every program that I know of in the United States looks at these issues as a family issue for a family to work on. It's like the child at Evoke becomes the lightning rod. They become the symptom bearer, if you will. So systems change, family system change is really, really critical. The hard part is that most people in the family, including the one that got sent to us, don't want to change. So that's why I keep re-emphasizing on this broadcast over and over again. The more that you're willing to do, the more you're willing to sit in on, the more you're willing to open up and talk about your feelings, the more you're willing to learn in the process, the more you support your brother or sister's change. My brother at Evoke has been there for almost 3 months. And I'm still not allowed to communicate with him or him with me. He's even able to write letters to his girlfriend now. Why is that? My relationship with him is one of the most important in my life, and I'm worried it's because I've done something wrong. I don't know the answer to that. That's not a typical response. I think you deserve an answer. I would ask it if you're willing to hear the answer, but that's not how it usually goes. Usually we start off with parents only, then we'll expand to siblings, grandparents, extended family, and then maybe a boyfriend or girlfriend. So what I'm telling you is that's not typical. And since it's not typical, I would ask my parents, if I was you, what's the reasoning behind it? And if they don't know, ask them to ask the therapist. But I always say this to the parents. I always say this to my therapist. Everybody deserves an answer to tough questions. And if some of it is about something you have or haven't done, in order for people to share that with you, it's going to be important that you listen to it. So if they say you were undermining his treatment, or you were saying negative things about his therapist, or whatever, I don't know that it was that. I have no idea, of course. Then listen to that. You don't have to be right, or they don't have to be right, but I would listen to that. But that's not a typical kind of course for us. So I'm wondering if it's just accidental or unintentional. I might challenge that a little bit. If I were your parents, I might challenge that if it were unintentional. Maybe your brother has something to do with it, what he's felt or shared. So that's my thought. My brother has gone through therapy programs before, and every time he's completed them, he seems to be getting better for a few weeks, and then his motivation to completely disappears. Is there anything I can do to help him keep up his motivation and better himself? I think I would say mostly it's around the kind of things that I've already said around learning and going on a journey yourself, being vulnerable yourself. But I think with, I don't think it's up to siblings to set tough boundaries. But at the end of the day, that's all you can do. I think you can only do that as a parent at the end of the day. And as a sibling, you can say, I can't be around you if you do X, Y, or Z. If you want to say that. If he's using drugs in your presence, getting high, lying, stealing, cheating, being aggressive, whatever it is. It's okay to take care of yourself. And sometimes that's all you can do. So I'll just kind of summarize. Do whatever work you're willing to do. Read or learn whatever you're willing to learn about. Ask the therapist, have your parents ask your therapist about what you might do or read about. That's number one. If there's some specific book about your brother's specific issue, ask about that. Be willing to be vulnerable. Be willing to be your own project. And then lastly, more than anything, set boundaries. I'll say one other thing. I'll say a fourth thing, and that is this. The best way to get your brother, what's going to be more important for your brother is not what you say to him, but how well you listen. And I will tell you this, guys. Most people are not good listeners. I tell this to the parents all the time. Most people are waiting for the other person to stop so they can make their point. Listening is really, really hard. You're not agreeing, you're not liking it. Doesn't always feel fuzzy and warm, but you're listening. You're trying to see the world through the other person's eyes. Really, being a therapist, the hardest skill that we learn is to keep our mouths shut. The hardest tool that we learn, that we are asked to practice, is to not know everything, not be know-it-all, not to lecture, not to overteach or preach. I wrote a blog this week. You're 21, so you're old enough. I wrote a blog this week about this to some degree. It's about attachment theory. Look at the recent blog, go to our website, click on the menu and then the blog and read it's about learning to listen. That's the thing that heals people. That's the thing that opens people up. And again, if you're a good listener, it's not that I agree with all of my children's decisions all the time, but the more I can listen, the more I can stay connected, the more they're going to use me as a resource, the more connected they're going to be to me. Otherwise, they're going to call that other person. And I don't want them to call that other person first necessarily, especially if they're a negative influence. Excuse me. Wish there was a sneeze button on this thing. All right, folks, I'm going to go over some upcoming announcements like I always do. And if there are any other questions, I have one more slide at the end. We want all parents, we invite siblings too if they want to go to 6 12-step meetings while their child is with us. Al-Anon.org, Kodo.org, FamiliesAnonymous.org, Nar-Anon.org, Alateen.org is for teenagers. Just think how hard it is and uncomfortable it is to walk into one of those meetings. That's a heroic thing, a courageous thing to do to model for your brother or sister in the program vulnerability. You can also go to NAMI.org, NAMI.org, for classes, resources, a lot of free stuff there. Listen to or subscribe to our podcast by searching Evoke Therapy Programs. If you have an Android device, use the SoundCloud app and download or subscribe to our podcast. Listen to it while you run, on the go. For the siblings on this, listen to one or two of the ones that we recommend. Here are the 10 most recommended webinars. that we have, and they're also podcasts. So the one I was talking about is the I Feel statement. Health 8 tools for transforming your relationship is the most listened to podcast that we have. And then I think there's maybe 11 and 12 actually. But there's some things that you can look at there to support your brother or sister. All right. Let me go here. You can go to Twitter and Instagram, inspirational quotes or pictures. Go to Facebook and search Evoke Therapy programs. Also, the Second Nature Alumni Foundation on Facebook is a foundation set up by former parents to help people who can't afford therapy. You can go to our Evoke blog, like I just mentioned. My book, The Journey of the Heroic Parent, is on paperback. You can buy it on Amazon or Kindle. Also, it's available in audio version. If you go to the Parent Alumni Foundation book page through the Amazon Smiles, those are books recommended by our therapists on various topics. A percentage of the proceeds goes to charity for people who can't afford therapy. It's the same price if you go to the regular Amazon page. Parent support groups, these are for if you're an adult sibling and you just want to hear what it's like, you're welcome to come to these. They're not really geared towards siblings, but if you want to learn about what we're teaching, it's stuff like this. You can go to one of these. I'm going to be in New York tomorrow night at CUNY. There's the address there, 6:30 tomorrow night. Not tomorrow night, that's Wednesday night, sorry. Toronto on May 10th, Seattle May 17th, Chicago May 23rd, and New York June 7th. Email Andrea@evoketherapy.com if you have questions or want to RSVP. If you want to do deeper work, we ask all parents to come to our workshops. Every parent, while their child is with us, ideally can come to a workshop. You can also combine that with a visit. If you want to do deeper work, you can find out about our intensives. These are for individuals, adults or older, or for families. So Finding You is for individuals, Finding Family is for families. Go to our website or email intensives@evoketherapy.com. Also, if you want to do something fun, this is a really cool idea. You can do fly fishing, mountain biking, canyoneering, river rafting, international trip. These are kind of like therapy light. The real goal here is to have fun, but there's a therapeutic staff who's the guide who can help talk about the experience with you. So if you want to do something fun as a family, it's not really therapeutically intense, but mostly get around fun. We have pursuits trips. They can be custom, or you can sign up for one of the ones that already exists. We've had a parent and child come just by themselves, and you can really sign up for anything you want to from the menu of options. All right, somebody left a nice question. Even though this is a sibling webinar, I heard exactly what I needed tonight. Thank you. I'm very, very glad. Glad to be helpful. Hope these things are helpful for all of you guys. And our next webinar will be, I actually have to change the date on that, Andrea, because I'm going to be in Toronto. So it'll be on motivational interviewing. I'll get the date out to you folks by email as soon as possible. I hope this point of contact is helpful. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, siblings. If you're allowed to write your brother or sister, write them a letter and tell them that you attended and learned something. If you're not allowed to write them just yet, maybe have your parents share that. They will feel very, very supported. They're more likely to open up and be vulnerable when they hear that kind of thing. Have a great evening, everybody. Take care, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.